Troy, are you able to link this to pin it? Troy? Yeah, you can pin it and great. All right, let me know if it is live on the Facebook.
Yeah, Josh,
I think it is.
You're good to go.
Great, great. Hopefully the rain is not too loud in the background here, but I'll make my quick introduction. Hello, positive trumpeters worldwide. Welcome to another trumpet talk. We are very, very glad and happy to have you all here. Our guest is a lead proponent of the tongue-controlled embouchure, the TCE that many of you may have heard of. And if you're not familiar with it, then it's going to be a wonderful and great opportunity to learn all about it. So we are very, very happy to welcome Rich here, all the way from Bristol, England. So, Rich, why don't you take it away?
Super, right. Josh, you were actually breaking up just a little bit then, so I hope that that I haven't been sat here in silence with you waiting for me to talk. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming online today to have a look at me chatting about all this shtick. I'm just going to start off, I think, by giving the basic elevator pitch about, what is TCE, where does it come from, all that sort of stuff, or maybe not a lot more than that. And then I'll tell you, I was going to say a little story, tell my own story about how I got involved with this stuff, why, for better or worse, I've stuck it out, and how I probably accidentally became an expert on the on the subject. Let's just change my view here. So actually, that's a bit better. Okay, so TCE. I mean, I've got this crazy T-shirt here, which you can't see. It's the same image that is on the little advert that we did for today's talk. But TCE, in the simplest terms, obviously stands for tongue-controlled embouchure. That is a term that was dreamt up by Bob Civiletti. I shouldn't have said Bob. He spells his name B-A-H-B because of people like me, Europeans who can't say Barb. He has a real thing about it being said with the right accent. And I should know better because my dad's name is actually Barb. And he lives in Florida. So, same thing. But anyway, so Bob Civiletti thought up the name TCE whilst waiting in an airport terminal one day, just around the time that him and Jerome Callett were writing the book Trumpet Secrets, or at least he was helping to collaborate with the writing of Trumpet Secrets. I don't want to get that little bit wrong, because some real fanatics get annoyed when you claim that he had a lot to do with it. So yes, the TCE has kind of got its roots in the teaching of a controversial character known as Jerome Callett. I would say that over the course of about 50 or 60 years, depending on when you start counting, I mean, Jerry came up with 3 distinctly different methods of teaching the way that he overcame his embouchure problems that he experienced when he was young. And the TCE, at least in the way that I present it, is supposedly a culmination of all of that work. So Callett's earliest teachings in the 60s and 70s was a method that we know as trumpet yoga, which was an alternative approach to pedal tones. Pedal tones done in the trumpet yoga way are learnt with 2 distinctly different embouchures that we commonly known as Einsetzen and Ansetzen. Einsetzen is a very high placement with the mouthpiece where you unfurl the lips, unroll the lips, and you play double pedal tones that start the highest pitch of them is 2 octaves lower than a low C. And then you use your normal embouchure for playing, in the normal register. Now, by working through Einsätzen and Ansätzen exercises where you're moving and merging these embouchures together, you learn to play with, it's been described as just a more unrolled lip setting. But there's also a huge amount of talk about, sort of relaxing the corners as you play. And so that's one of the first things where, when you're talking about Jerome Khalett, you come up against traditional kind of teaching of firm corners and all that he always said was sort of, I don't want to use the word wrong. I think it would be really bad to get into rights and wrongs here, but for better or worse, Jerome Khalett said we should always play with loose corners. And I can go into explaining that in a bit more detail if you want, but I'm already making the introduction to this. This is supposed to be an elevator pitch, and I've been going on for a bit of time, about a long time ago. So after the trumpet yoga,
It's a very tall elevator.
yeah. After the trumpet yoga era, Jerry got into teaching this thing that he called super chops, which most people would describe as just a lip-to-lip compression type embouchure. It's, I think you need a little more detail than that to really, to put it in context. But again, it's chasing this idea of keeping the mouth corners relaxed in order to create resistance to the airstream in the center. So again, this is another one of those things that's quite a fundamental part of Jerry's sort of description, if you like, his model of how playing works. And that is that by providing resistance to the airstream, the result is internal compression. And so we're getting to this point where we're saying that actually the thing that is controlling tone, pitch, and dynamic is the compression of air, and not really the flow of air through the trumpet. Let's say we're not blowing air through the trumpet. We need to get used to the idea of sort of using the embouchure to almost prevent air from getting into the trumpet. Now, that method carried on being taught for quite some time, probably another 20 years or so. So I suppose a thing that I've missed already is that both during trumpet yoga and super chops eras, Jerry taught that you should articulate through the teeth. And so again, that's another thing that to most traditional understandings of playing is a big no-no. I don't want to use words like sacrilege, but they're going to come out of my mouth. So we just have to deal with that. Tonguing through the teeth is really remarkable. It's one of those things that takes practice. You can't just, I think that actually this is, overall with anything relating to massive changes in your approach to playing, it's stuff that takes time. I've had lessons with pupils who are really receptive to following instructions, or maybe they were already had things in a certain position that allowed it to be possible. But once you learn to articulate by touching the top lip with the tip of the tongue and then essentially spitting, then you get this a very sort of a real difference in the sort of sound and the control that you have when a note is released. It's absolutely immediate. And in the old days, Jerry said that the result is that you use more air. Now, actually, he really flipped that up on his head when it got to the point of the tongue-controlled embouchure, because then we start talking about using, let's say, as little air as is necessary to produce sound. That's a sentence that has been sort of twisted a lot. Some, actually, there are people they're talking about TCE who say we're basically trying to use no air. But that, we do have to at some point address physics. And by that I mean that it is still air going through lips that makes sound. And so, you can't get away from that. If there was a way of making the lips vibrate without air passing through them, then maybe we could, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So final point about these older methods, the trumpet yoga and super chops, I just mentioned that they require that you articulate with the tongue through the teeth. And that has quite a few sort of consequences in that in order to be able to get the tongue through the teeth, the jaw has to be open. And you can't really close the jaw as you ascend in pitch, as you know, we may think that that's a good thing to do. We may have actually been taught to do that. A lot of those who talk about tongue arching, you know, will recognize that actually as you say that E or C or T kind of vowel sound in order to change the position of the tongue in the mouth, another result of that may be for some people that they close the jaw as they ascend. I'm getting to the point where I want to start talking about Roy Stevens, and it's going to go so off topic. So let's just leave that for now. Maybe I can circle back because he's certainly there in Khaled's history at some point. But so yeah, once you're articulating through the teeth, your jaw has to be open, and that's going to affect the back of the back of the mouth or the top of the throat in two ways as well. You know, having your jaw more open means that this has to be relaxed, but also having your tongue so far forward in the mouth that you can touch the lips means that the back of the tongue, for a lot of people, is quite unlikely that it could get in the way. You know, well, actually, a lot of problems that the pupils I've had in the past suffer with is this sort of what we would normally call closing the throat. And you know, really, we can't actually close the throat itself. It doesn't have those muscles where we can constrict it. But closing of the throat can happen with the back of the tongue, and it can also happen from being tense down here. There are all sorts of other things that that we can get into. Oh, I've just lost the screen. Let's hope. Oh no, it's all fine. There are also all sorts of other things that can cause tension here, and one of them is stretching the lips, which again is a big sort of thing that we're trying to avoid with TCE. But yeah, so this is the one thing. I mean, I think what you'll find is that if I start talking about a lot of the problems that people have when they play, then we'll find that they can be put down to certain ideas that we sort of think are essential when looking at things through a really traditional lens. But I'm trying really hard not to derail this even further. So tongue through the teeth, open jaw, open throat. Yes, let's move on. Okay, so then we get to the era which basically started sometime around the mid to late 90s, basically from then up until when Jerome Khaled died about 18 months ago. It was May of 2019, not even 18 months. And that is this idea of playing with the tongue anchored to the bottom lip. Now it's not only anchored, but also sort of folded over in a way. The word he always used was beveled. And it's thick, filling all the space between the teeth. So really, it's just taking every idea that we've just discussed so far and making it even more extreme. Because when the tongue is, let's say, if I was to put the tongue in this sort of position, which is similar to how it was described in his DVD that came out in 2007. This kind of tip of the tongue behind the teeth, but then folding it forward. There's really no space for air to get through that. And that's it's certainly usually the first question that people ask when I sort of tell them about how this system works. But actually there have been a lot of variations on this tongue position, and I wouldn't say that is one in particular that I use all the time. I think it's just a very good way of getting people to sort of see how mental this idea can be when you first come to it. But really, once you're holding the tongue in this sort of fist-like position between the teeth, it's just achieving the same things again. So it's holding the jaw open, which keeps the throat open and relaxed. It keeps the back of the tongue out of the throat. And it also means that because the tongue is stronger than the lips, that you are creating far greater resistance to the airstream. And hence it's easy to compress air. And that's what's going to give you what Jerome Kallett would have said is tone, power, range, and endurance. It all sounds so simple. So when I teach people how to play with TCE, I basically I have 3 tools at my disposal. Other than just discussing a bit of ideology about how a trumpet may sound, or how you might want to choose a certain type of mouthpiece to make development of this technique easier. We've basically got the Einsätze and Ansätze and double pedal tone exercises, which comes from trumpet yoga. We've got the spit buzz, which is something that I'll demonstrate a little in a minute. I think that for the most part, that is what Jerry saw as being the cornerstone of the technique. And there is the 5 articulations, which is something that Bob Civiletti came up with as a way of teaching people to teach themselves to play with TCE. And I think that that's a really important thing, because that leads me perfectly into telling my story. Now, I'm going to try and do a little bit of a screen split thing here so I can read my notes at the same time. Yeah, that works. Okay, good. So I'll try not to ramble too much at this section, but this is my story, and it's kind of, I think that this is a nice thing to do in this talk, because I've given sort of little talks and interviews about TCE before, but a lot of the time, especially when it's actually an interview, you tend to get led down this path of explaining ideas and rights and wrongs, and it doesn't so much give over the context, if you like. So as you know, I'm British. I come from not too far away from where I live now. I live in Bristol, which is in the southwest. I grew up in a small city about 20 miles away called Wells. I did lots of music when I was very young, singing in choirs, playing recorder and guitar and this sort of thing. But no, it didn't really sort of enthuse me all that much until until basically some old man turned up at my school one day and played the Match of the Day theme tune on the trumpet, and that was me hooked. That was me. Basically, I'm still playing the stupid thing 20 years later. You know, actually, it's nearly 30 years at this point, because I was nearly 10 at the time. So I joined the local brass band, and fortunately, because of the teacher that I got when I went to what we call secondary school, he very quickly also got me involved in a small big band and county wind band and this sort of thing. And I was also doing a little bit of youth theatre stuff. I mean, we're doing musicals at school, but also there was a small theatre in Wells. And so I was involved in a lot of music stuff and all cornet and trumpet playing. When I was 16, I then went to the Cathedral School in Wells, which is a specialist music school. And I was only there for a couple of years, but that's where I sort of really got introduced to the idea of serious music playing, if you like. They had a full symphony orchestra and a 10-piece brass ensemble, and again, then a big band and all sorts of opportunities. You know, I had master classes off of people like Crispian Steele Perkins and all these John Miller, all these guys that sort of came down to the school to give help to the specialist musicians. So I was there for a couple of years, and then I had a year out, and I went to Welsh College of Music and Drama, where I had a great teacher called Philippe Schatz. And Philippe was and still is the principal trumpet player of the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. He is a really inspirational musician. It's inspirational to me because he never stops trying to learn. He's sort of kind of rooted in the Claude Gordon approach to playing, which is what he taught me at the time. But also, I spent 6 months doing Robert Spalding's double high C in 37 weeks. I didn't do it for 37 weeks, but I got the double high C. It sounded terrible. It was all pressure and overblowing, so it was nothing to get excited about. But there was that. We did some Maggio stuff, and we did James Stamp, and all of your sort of Herbert Clark and all these. I went through all the traditional, what I would refer to now as traditional approaches, and so I had a really rounded sort of understanding of all these various methods. I think that maybe that, more than anything, really helped me to become what I am now when we talk about the TCE, because everything I learned about TCE right from the beginning was in this context. There's something that I really wonder about a lot is starting beginners on the TCE. It's not what I tend to do all the time, because I genuinely don't know what the consequences of that would be. But when you look at someone like me, who was already a professional player, who learned the TCE, I got a huge amount of benefit out of it. When you look at someone like Bob Civiletti, he was already an accomplished player when he got into it. Went on to record world debut Baroque trumpet album, and won a solo competition in Europe. But if you were to take somebody that had no musical background and just try and go full on TCE from the beginning, like I said, I don't know what the consequences of that would be, and it's something that's interesting. And one day I'll find a guinea pig, I'm sure. But anyway. So, I mean, that was just a little bit about context. So I went out into the working world, sort of 25 years old, and I was playing lots of, musical theatre shows, doing small group jazz stuff, and, getting involved in ska bands and a function band, playing weddings and corporate stuff. A lot of the same sort of things that I do now, actually, quite some time later. But I had, up to this point, been completely classically trained. I had played in big bands when I was from the age of sort of 13 to 18. But I was playing lead trumpet in a big band on a Bach 1.5 C mouthpiece, and so that doesn't mean that people can't do that, but it's not I wouldn't call it the right tool for the job, and the thing is, I was out playing. If you're doing a show, you're doing 8 or 9 shows a week. But I was even in a normal week, I'd have 2 or 3 rehearsals and a couple gigs on the weekend, so 4 or 5 nights a week. And I was going home with a battered face every night, and I just knew that it wasn't sustainable. I had tried things like going and buying a jet tone mouthpiece, getting a 14A4A, and that actually made my problems worse, because I just didn't know how to use it. And I think there's also sort of a bit of the fact that I just I didn't have the time to practice, or the sort of hours and routines that I had when I was at college. That's obviously a big thing that we all have to adapt to when you have to get on with life, And anyway, I started talking to a lot of people online. There wasn't an awful lot in the way of I wasn't on the Trumpet Herald or Trumpet Master forums in those days. There was a British forum. I don't remember I think it was called Brass Herald or something like that, which sort of turned more into a magazine sort of site. Maybe I'm getting it confused with a magazine, but there were good players on there. There was There was Mike Barkley from Barkley Microphones. He was one of the people, and I can remember some various sort of. There was a London-based player called Sam, and I'm sure that Brian Davis was involved with this forum as well. And I can remember them talking about downsizing, about using, learning to use smaller gear, and you're not going to lose your sound and all this sort of thing. But to me, downsizing was using a 3C, and I used a Bach 3C, which I may or may not have drilled the throat out on. I used that thing for a couple years, but really I was still, just blowing as hard as I could and mashing my face up with the mouthpiece. And so, I think maybe what really the point of all this is that although I'd had good education, it wasn't specific to the sort of playing I was doing, and I didn't have the tools I needed to improve in that way. So one night I stumbled across Jerome Callett's website, which was it's superchops.com or super-chops.com. It does still exist. I don't really know how long it's going to be up there, but it's definitely in, if you know about archive.org, there's the Wayback Machine, and there are various old versions of Callett's websites on the Wayback Machine. Old Callett.com from 1998 is quite funny, actually. But yeah, so I found this website, and I'm reading through this description, and it's saying, curl your tongue over between your teeth is the first thing, and then he's talking about how rather than blowing air through the trumpet, you want to spit. And then the next thing on the list is use the tongue to stop the air after every note. And you're thinking, this is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. This is terrible. It's like this idea of, we all know what a tongue stop sounds like. I mean, I haven't played this thing since we started this, but that slapping kind of tongue stop thing. And so I'm reading this and I'm just thinking, this is nuts. But at the same time, I knew that I really wanted to discover something new. And this is about as extreme as it gets when it comes to discovering something new in trumpet technique. And so I tried to do a little more research, and there are some YouTube videos. There was this classic one that a lot of people have seen of this monk describing the setup, and it pauses every couple seconds and flashes a little message up on the screen describing what he's doing. His setup is really over the top, in my opinion. But when you've not done it before, it was helpful to me. But there was I found that they were talking about this on the Trumpet Herald forum, and there was a few people there sort of posting tips and little videos of them playing. And so over a few months, I sort of literally had to pluck up the courage to try spit buzzing. And that's the thing I'm going to sort of tell you about now. And spit buzzing, like I said before, some would consider it to be the cornerstone of our technique, and that the TCE technique. And it's literally, I would say it is the primary form of note production. And it's also what we use to build strength in the tongue and develop the habit of all of the habits, keeping the jaw open, gripping the tongue with the lips, all this sort of stuff. And so basically, if I was to introduce it to somebody who's never done it before, I would start off just by showing you how it looks and sounds, which is like this. And you can't really see an awful lot going on there, but on the inside, I am placing the front of my tongue across the top of my bottom lip. And then I close the top lip down over the top of that. And then I kind of tense everything a little. Now that's different to when I play, because when we're doing any kind of loose lip buzz, you need something to give you some structural integrity. And once the mouthpiece is involved to play, that's going to be different. You've got the help of the rim of the mouthpiece just supporting that top lip a little, but when we spit buzz, we're going to generate a little more tension. So Now, something that I like to sort of talk about when I first show this is that we all know about tongue level, about this idea of raising and lowering the tongue as we change pitch. And some players have even mentioned that when they're in the extreme upper register, I can think specifically. I mean, Adam Rapper has said it in his YouTube videos. I'm trying to think of other examples. There was this whole conversation once about I don't want to say names and be wrong, so it doesn't matter. I do this. That's all that matters. But when you do extreme tongue level, like that ish position, we start talking about it being there being a hiss, and that's because the airstream is being directed straight down the center of the tongue, and I would say, you know, for me, underneath the top teeth. And that's really what's giving us this focused airstream that then hits the inside of the top lip with a lot more force than if you're just imagining a wind tunnel. Now, I know that that's an extremely bad sort of representation of the other end of the scale, but if you imagine a wind tunnel and then close your lips, you might get a buzz, but you can hear it doesn't focus or resonate in the same way that this does. And so yeah, I've got the tongue here. I close the lips around it, and then it's literally a matter of spitting. They used to say, imagine that you've got a hair on top of your tongue or a tea leaf, and you're trying to spit it out of your mouth, but it never goes away, and the tongue doesn't fall back. It stays in position. I mean, that's something that I'm really proud of my stupid t-shirt design, but that's what this is all about, is that this is this tongue connecting to the bottom lip, and it stays in place. Now, if this were accurate, that would actually have to come over and be touching both lips. But it is just a t-shirt. So this is the spit buzz, and this is what we use to sort of learn to play, to produce notes in the TCE. So when you first start off with TCE, you play low-pitched scales and harmonic exercises using just this as our form of note production. So now this is the thing. Hopefully the volume level hasn't got too corrupted from me playing, but almost immediately. Oh, great, thank you. Almost immediately, the response that you get from people is, "You can't play music like that," and you're right. And I don't, is my answer. You know, this is the thing, is that these are physical exercises. This is something that we're doing to develop a habit and to strengthen the tongue. If you sit here and spit buzz notes like that for 10 minutes, then your tongue will ache. It's tiring. I mean, when I first got into this, you know, that I used to, if I get a day where I could sit and practice, or you know, for hours on end, I would often suffer with a bit of a lisp afterwards, because it's tiring, and you really feel it at the back of the tongue as well. And so this is the thing, we are developing habits that are basically going to result in use of greater air compression, a very forward tongue position, you know, more efficient playing. But once when we come back to that, what I was talking to about some time back, this idea of context, this having approached this method from knowing all about lots of other methods. What I say is, let me define embouchure or technique, or, you know, note production as being a fine balance of lips, tongue, and air. Basically, by offsetting a lot of the effort that the lips are doing with the tongue, by using more effort with the tongue, you end up using less effort with the lips. So this is the thing, is that I can still play without my tongue in place, and my flexibility is actually pretty good. But if I try to play a gig like that, then I can get tired much quicker. than if I, if I'm using the tongue in this position. And, if you use more tongue, you also use less air, because again, it's that focused air stream. I just like a lot of the time to kind of present spit buzz. It's just a tool. This is something that you can learn, anyone can do, and it can be really helpful, for overcoming a lot of things. All the sort of stuff I mentioned, tension in the throat, getting the tongue out of the way, keeping the jaw open, all of that sort of stuff that could be seen as sort of universally beneficial. You could practice spit buzzing, you can practice playing using the spit buzz, but then when you play, just do what you normally do. There are definitely different approaches. Now, that sort of leads me on to explaining that I think that anyone can do TCE. Anyone can take 5 minutes to figure out how this feels, and how it works. And you might not have your full range, or you might not, be able to play expressively like it. But really, the difference between, being a TCE player and not being a TCE player is just deciding to do it all the time. And for me, that's been, that's something that has come in stages. I spent a lot of time just, once I was taught how to do the double pedal tones properly by Bob Civiletti. I never got to that part of the story. I started, I did a whole load of different exercises with that. And I really found that I discovered new lip positions, and there's all sorts of, there's things like, the relationship between jaw alignment and teeth alignment, and sorry, that's the same thing, and lip alignment, and all of this that gets affected slowly over a long period of time if you practice Einsätze and Ansätze and double pedal tones. And so, although I went all in the beginning, let's get back to the story. Although I went all in at the beginning, so we're talking about 2012. I've discovered Jerome Callett's website in July, and in October I had no gigs for 6 weeks, and so I said to myself, I'm going to try this for 3 weeks, and if I find in 3 weeks' time that I can't play the trumpet, then I've got 3 weeks to go back to what I did before. Now, this gig that I had coming up on in the beginning of December was a Handel's Messiah, and I was playing first trumpet. So, it's not the easiest of things. Anyway, so I went all in sort of October 2012, and I would be lying if I said I never went back, but I didn't go back before that gig. I carried on. I sort of did that gig in December. It went fine. And then I doubled down. I bought Jerome Callett mouthpiece, and I had a lesson with him over the phone, and which was something that Jerry did. Now that's an interesting thing in itself, because Jerry really, certainly in the TCE days in the last 20 years, he taught by ear. He would tell you what to do with your tongue, or he would tell you, why don't you experiment with setting your lip in a certain way before you place the mouthpiece or whatever. And then he would listen to the results, and he would say, can you hear that that's better? Can you hear this and that in your sound? And it was really fascinating that, he wouldn't even use Skype. I used Skype. I used Skype to phone his telephone in his house, and he would just sit there and listen to you play. And it was really a remarkable experience. But I went all in with this. I experimented a little bit with Jeff Smiley's balanced embouchure method, which is also very interesting, and the Lynn Nicholson MF protocol. I really got dragged into a few crazy ideas for a time, but basically I consistently found that every time I strayed from TCE, I felt weak. I felt like I, was using pressure, and I was blowing much harder. And, it's very misleading, but it feels good to blow hard. It feels good to try to play better, like physically try harder when you play. That doesn't mean that it's a good thing necessarily. TCE is certainly an extreme end of the scale when it comes to efficiency. And maybe I should just specify, when I say efficiency, I'm talking literally about putting less in and getting more out. You know, I use very little air, but I can make a lot of sound that way. And again, another sort of experiment you can do yourself is actually, if you do some kind of loose lip buzz, you can usually demonstrate to yourself that when you reduce the quantity of air, you actually get more sound. Because you're creating a smaller aperture and it ends up vibrating less. So, I mean, just simply, if I start like this, and this is without the tongue, if I blow more air, everything gets blown apart and there is no sound. Now, we can debate to the end of time about this whole chicken and egg, lips vibrating in sympathy with the air column stuff. I'm not naive to these theories, but I believe that when we do that same spit buzz action into an instrument, then it's not the same as doing some kind of loose lip buzz, you know. So that's my answer to that. I think that maybe something I've missed. So I'm just thinking of just trying to see where I'm at, because I've got a page of text here and I've just sort of been glancing at it. Something I've missed is talking about sound. I did sort of briefly mention it when I talked about sort of, you know, that knee-jerk reaction to a crazy exercise. But something that I had been taught about sound and something I had been told was real when I was studying music was this concept of, you know, creating a large, dark tone on the trumpet. And maybe that's something that comes from having done a lot of orchestral training and stuff. But in my first lesson that I had with Jerome Kallett, he said something to me that sort of really changed my mind about that. And he basically said, I mean, he loved to tell stories, Jerome. And what he would say is, oh, Herbert Clark in the 1920s, you know, he was interviewed about the correct way to play an instrument. And he said that making a dark sound on the trumpet or the soprano cornet was always wrong. Now that's an interesting thing in itself, because he doesn't mention playing the B flat cornet, and maybe he thought that actually you should have a dark sound on that. But that was still at a time when they were, considered to be two different instruments, and maybe we shouldn't get too deep into that, because I'll talk until you fall asleep. But he then went on to say, look, why do you he said two things, and one of them not everyone's gonna like. First of all, he said to me, when you hear a really good violinist play a solo, their sound is sharp and articulate and it resonates throughout the whole hall. He says, you never hear a violinist trying to sound like a cello. I thought, yeah, fair enough. Now, I've often said to people, you never hear an oboe player trying to sound like a bassoon. It's the same thing. Why is it that when you're studying classical trumpet, they tell you that you need to try and sound like a trombone? Now, I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there go, oh, well, I've never said that. I've never been told that. And maybe that's true, but I was told it and I hear it all the time. I've got a friend who, minutes before going on stage to play a piccolo trumpet is stood there talking about having a warm sound. And I'm like, do you know what you're holding in your hand? There's no such thing as a warm sound on a piccolo trumpet. But these ideas, they get really inside us and we don't think about them much. Now, this is the thing, is that the day that I stopped trying to sound dark, all of a sudden I could play high notes a lot easier. And that's because sound and range, or not range, but tone and pitch are intrinsically linked. You know, you don't play high and dark. That's a massive contradiction. And I think that really what he was getting at is that I had never been taught to play resonant. I'd never been taught to try and excite the instrument as such. It was all about, as long as you put plenty of air through it, your sound will go. And I'll tell you where it goes sideways. It doesn't go into the audience, you know. That's a real thing. And so coming back to, I talked a little bit about how wanted to downsize my mouthpiece before I got into this stuff, and I really struggled and I couldn't do it. And it's because I was still trying to chase this big mouthpiece sound, this sort of yes, Bach 1C sound. And as a result, I was sabotaging my own, the integrity of my embouchure, if you like. I mean, I wouldn't say that I really had an embouchure in those days, because it was defined by the rim of my mouthpiece, which for an awful lot of people, it is. You know, we think, what is the embouchure? Well, it's the bit that's trapped and held in place by this circle here. Well, that's not that's not really how it should work. You know, I've taught a few people about this idea of mouthpiece independence, which basically comes from nothing more than having the ability to hold your lips in one position. Or to you know, sort of embouchure integrity, if you like, the ability to focus the lips and control the release of air that way. And once you're playing like that, once you can, you know, you've got this stability, which is, then you can plunk anything in front of it, and you can still, you should still be able to control it. You know, it's just aperture control really, but it's really not on the subject of TCE so much now. But yeah, so this is a thing. Once, you know, once I learned that the sound we should be trying to make is resonant and it should carry over distance, and you know, that we make that sound by using maybe less air, but certainly less physical effort, then all of a sudden I could move from using, I was, you know, playing on a 3C, I could move from that to the first of Jerome Callett mouthpieces that I got was his Super Chops 4, which is kind of like, I'm going to go Warburton sizes because I find them easy to describe. It's like a 6M. You know, it's the 640 internal diameter and quite a shallow double cup. And yeah, at first I sounded awful, but within a couple of weeks, I was making a much better sound, and you know, I acclimatized to it really quickly, because all of a sudden your embouchure isn't being defined by your equipment. So that's a really interesting thing. So anyway, I went a little bit back and forth for a couple of years, because I really loved everything that I learned from TCE in terms of efficiency and how to use smaller gear, how to create a characteristic trumpet sound, and not necessarily relying on any particular equipment to do that. But I always sort of felt like I was out there by myself doing this crazy thing that nobody believed in. And so I was aware that Bob Civiletti existed. I had his CD. It's called Art of the High Baroque, and it's recordings of all these concertos written in sort of the 1770s. They're really into the Baroque style concertos written in the classical period, and they called it the Rococo period, and sort of high Baroque stuff. And these are you know, Baroque trumpet solos that go up to what we would call G over high C on a Baroque trumpet, which is like, it's not a double C, it's actually a semitone lower. And if you're playing at Baroque pitch, it's a semitone lower than that. But it's like the 24th harmonic on the instrument. It's pretty unbelievable in terms of range. And Bob Civiletti recorded like a whole bunch of these concertos. He was the first person in the world to play them back to back on a Baroque trumpet. And I don't think anyone's ever done it since either, which is quite remarkable. But I went to him for lessons, and he introduced me to his way of training the tongue, which is the 5 articulations. Now, I won't go into massive detail about it, but basically, the one floor elevator pitch is that you go that you practice what most people would see as lip slurs. So I call them harmonic exercises, because I am really particular about choice of words at times. So you practice harmonic exercises using a number of different styles of attack. So you spit attack, like I've described, the goo attack, which was like, it's happening further back in your mouth. If you imagine double tonguing, then it's the K, you know. And huffing, which is like a staccato breath attack, do-goo, which is like a slow double tongue, and then slurring. And by learning to play all manner of harmonic exercises in this way, you just build up the habit and the strength in the tongue to stay in place at all times. And what you find over time is that by keeping the tongue there, you're suddenly not really required to use any kind of other effort when you play. You're using less air. You are, like I said, you're building your technique around articulation. And maybe that's something that I've sort of thought about quite a bit when teaching, and certainly when you go in to help out some youth group with players that you're not familiar with, and you sit there and you listen to trumpet players for 10 minutes and nobody tongues a note. They're all just slurring everything, and you think, well, if you're slurring everything all the time and you don't know which direction your lips are supposed to move in to manipulate pitch, then it's obvious that the only tools you've got are pressing and squeezing and stretching and blowing. But if you were to build build your technique around articulation, then basically you can either hit a note or you can't. I mean, this is one of those things that actually really destroys a lot of things that are written in method books from the 30s and 50s and maybe even 70s, when people are using lines like "step on the gas as you go higher" and stuff. And I say, well, look, I can spit this note, which sounded awful. I can spit this note, which didn't sound much better. And I can spit this note. And, I'm not stepping on the glass. I'm not taking deep breaths. You can't really see it, but I'm really quite leaning back in this chair with my feet up. It's sort of one of those things where it makes you think, well, why are we talking so much about posture? Now, I know the answers to these questions. I'm not being, I can say things at times that people think that maybe I just don't understand what I'm saying. We talk about posture because then we can breathe correctly. But what's breathing correctly when I can play any note on the instrument like this? That's obviously we need a certain amount of air to play a phrase. And if we're going to play, certain, there are times when compression is the wrong sound. Don't get me wrong about that. I understand that we want to, that sometimes playing lyrically with airflow is better for what we're trying to communicate as musicians. But there are all sorts of things that we kind of build our technique around that may not be necessary. Again, I wouldn't say that we never have to practice long notes, but I certainly haven't done it for quite some time. But I'm just about to set myself off about a conversation that I saw on Facebook minutes before I came on here. So let's just go. I'm going to go back to my notes and see if I've got anything insightful to say. So really, yeah. So I hung out.
We do have some questions that have come through.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
We do have some questions. So Troy here asks, actually, do the corners stay loose while doing this?
Well, that's the idea. Yeah. So, and the way that I would sort of describe it is this. It's like, well, first of all, if I was to just do what, I'm going to come back to this idea of loose lip buzzing, just because you can kind of see what's going on. If I just hold my lips together and blow, in order to maintain some kind of structural integrity here, I need to firm up that bottom lip. It's been seen by quite a lot of, well, I say a lot, there haven't been a lot of them, but some famous embouchure experts, particularly Donald Reinhardt, that the bottom lip is really like is something that can cause a lot of problems, particularly it not coming back to the right position after you've breathed in and stuff like that. And so we tend to try and tackle this issue of the bottom lip by firming up, by flattening the chin and holding in the corners. And that's going to give me some structural integrity, something to build the embouchure around. But the thing is, that's really tiring. If I get the tongue through the teeth and I build the embouchure around that, can grip in the middle with the lips, and the corners can do what they want. But what you'll find is that as soon as you start to tighten here, it's one of those things that's at times I think that Jerry Callett would tell you to do something like loosen the corners, but what he's really telling you to do is not the opposite. So don't tighten the lips, don't flatten the chin. And so
that you don't need all that extra.
Sorry, Josh, I didn't hear that.
The idea then is it's not somebody you needed to begin with. You shouldn't be adding all that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's an interesting idea, certainly. I mean, the early sort of super chopped trumpet yoga stuff was really all about that. When you go from, I didn't really demonstrate the double pedal tones, but when you do that Einsätzen and Ansätzen, that's the bottom lip going from this sort of rolled out to rolled in position. And you really can't do these motions if what you're thinking about is this, holding those corners firm. So yeah, good question.
We do have some more as well. So someone here asked, or someone commented here, that's what they see with the sometimes the key is just let the air pass through the lips, no matter what's happening, with a relaxed throat. And sometimes the embouchure, it's not that handicap we're supposed to have. I'm not sure if I quite understand that comment from Michael Pedron. Maybe he can chime in again if that makes sense to you. And then Ryan Chapman writes here, one of Jerry's methods encouraged bunching the chin.
Yes. It's the whole chin bunching thing is something that, well, I mean, for a start, it really belongs in his older teaching, like you said, one of his methods, because he used to teach that you want to get the bottom lip up over the top teeth. And I think it's the idea that if you're all relaxed here and you can use this muscle, then that's an easy way to do it. I've certainly thought about it a lot. And I think that one of those things, I mean, one of the things with Jerry is that you would go for a lesson with him, and then you'd go back 3 weeks later and he'd tell you to forget everything that he told you last time. But when you talk to sort of people who are really into this stuff, some people will tell you to push the tongue forward into the bottom lip. But if you read some of Jerry's stuff, even as recent as the DVD that came out in 2007, he's talking about the other way around. He's talking about the lips gripping the tongue. And so if you've got this connection between lips and tongue, yeah, bunching the chin is essentially what's going to give us that thing. And when I do, I don't know if this will work, but say you've got a this lip trill, I couldn't tell you either way whether I'm doing that with the tongue or the lips, because if I think about one, then that's the one I'm using. But it is a bunching, it is that kind of upwards movement. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I was always under the impression, because I've only had limited exposure to these methods, I was under the impression that when, my understanding just from having that limited exposure was when they said, bring that the tongue, the lip would grip the tongue, right? Or bring that, and that it's not, or that the tongue would be touching the lip. Is just that, like, I always thought of it as one moving way too far, but is it more of a balance where kind of the tongue is coming right up to it, or the lip is kind of coming right up to it, and the tongue is just kind of meeting it there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is something that certainly moves around, but as a general rule, what you want is for the top of the tongue to touch the inside of the top lip. And so how any individual goes about achieving that is going to be different. And there have been various ways that it's been described. I mean, in Jerry's latest stuff, he drew pictures where the bottom lip actually starts between the teeth. and then once you curl the tongue, there's no space for them to go anywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See,
But I find yeah, go on.
I was gonna say the way that I play has changed over the years, and I don't know, a handful of years ago, I kind of switched over to what many people call anchor tonguing, and
Yeah.
to me, that's the big difference that I am kind of like seeing and feeling is that whereas I may feel that the tip of my tongue is there, I would really have to change, like it really is that explanation where you're saying about spitting that would change the tongue position that would allow it to then have that connection with the upper lip.
Yes. Yeah, that's
It's
right.
it's kind of like this that's not anything that I'd ever heard before, so I'm gonna have to experiment with that, see what that's all about.
Yeah. Did you have more questions immediately, or should I just make my excuses about why I got into this position where I'm sort of thought of as an expert?
I don't see any questions right here at this very moment, so if you want to continue
So,
onward.
I mean, just because apparently when I wrote down my little life story, it went on for, oh God, there's even more. It went on for quite a few pages, but I was just going to say that, sort of back in about 2014 was really when I started, I would say, I've got this blog, which is called Trumpet Planet. And I'd written an article about Jerome Kallett and how, when you go online and try to discover his stuff, you just find all this contradictory information. You find people, sort of posting knee-jerk reactions and very negative stuff. And it can all seem a little bit crazy and all this. And this blog post just discusses some of the basic ideas that as I understood them at the time. But then I sort of found that people were contacting me and asking me questions about the TCE because they couldn't find this information elsewhere. And so after I met up with Bob Civiletti the second time, I came home. I don't know if I should tell the whole story. I came home and I made a website in one night. And for one reason or another, I then forgot the password of how to log on to that website for about 3 weeks. And so it sat there not being, not live. But anyway, I eventually got this website up on the internet, and it was just explaining the TCE as I saw it, now breaking down the 4 points on the t-shirt, which are 5 articulations, tongue through the teeth, the correct use of air or not overblowing, and the sound concept. Later on, I put on a page there about the way that the lips move. And really, it's not a definitive description. It's just sort of information about how how to, one way of understanding the technique and the results of using it. But I try to do it through a lens of discussing technique. Because we got an understanding of the physics of brass playing that we didn't have some years ago. So if I just go out there and say, oh, so such and such a person wrote in their book in 1965 that we should do this and this is why it's wrong, then that may not be, it may just be that was the best way they could explain it at the time. And so I think that's a lot of the work that needs doing in terms of explaining the TCE is like that now. There haven't been enough people to break these ideas down and to describe them in ways that other people can understand. And so that's sort of been a little bit of that a mission of mine in that area. But again, people carried on contacting me, and I ended up sort of becoming the moderator of the Jerome Kallett Facebook group, or one of the moderators. I don't actually run the group. And then one day I just thought, well, I might as well start teaching this thing because so many people want to know about it. And so I start teaching it. I write a pedal tone book. I wrote another book about, which is essentially the Bob Civiletti's 5 articulations applied to a bunch of exercises that I'd written before about teaching people how the valves work on a trumpet, because a lot of kids I work with don't understand that that's the semitone button, that's the tone button, and so on, you know. That became my second ebook, The Seven Bugles. And so, you know, I've got books, I've got the websites, I've got this, I do the Facebook group, and I also sell mouthpieces as well that are for this, that are sort of designed to help people learn this technique. Now, I didn't really go a lot into the equipment, and earlier on, I definitely spent a few minutes talking about how we shouldn't be relying on any particular piece of equipment for something, but
Hey, can I jump in again with a question here?
go for it. Yeah.
So Debbie Silverthorne asks here, if the tongue is connecting with the upper lip, is that where the articulation is occurring? The due to, not the goo-coo.
With the so with the spit attack, or you could even argue that with any production of any note, the sound is initiated at that point where the top of the tongue is touching the inside of the top lip. Now, one way that I've described it before when talking with a super analytical friend of mine is that you could imagine it that, you know, obviously we need there to be flow of air through the lips in order for there to be sound. That's something that we can't really refute with any current understanding. But I describe playing as being the controlled release of pressurized air. So it's the air pressure in the mouth which is determining tone, pitch, and dynamic. And so really the question is, where does static compression of air turn into flow? And the answer is that with the TCE, it happens as far forward as possible. And it happens at that point as the air goes through the contact between the top of the tongue and the inside of the top lip. Yeah.
So then Ryan Chapman asks here, so you're tonguing between your teeth, question mark. I did that until I realized I was doing negative things that I didn't like around the sound. So I believe that tonguing between the teeth forces you to keep the jaw more open.
Yes.
But doesn't always give the desired articulation. So do you change your articulation to fit the style? Do you find some of these concepts are more beneficial than others and develop your own ideas based on them?
Yes, yeah, I see that's a really insightful thing to bring up, actually. So I would say that, you know, a couple years back, I mentioned that I had a couple trumpet lessons with Gary Ellsbrook, who's a regular on this group, and you know he was giving me some transcriptions to play, Chet Baker and I can't think of the name of trumpet players. Clifford Brown, you know, I think I did a Tom Harrell transcription, and all these guys, their articulation is nothing like the effect that you get from TCE. And I really had to sort of sit down and deconstruct what it is I do. Now, the thing is that I think that you can get a wider variety of note production from simply what I would call tongue on lips, which means doing your normal kind of attack that people would describe as being 2-2-2, where you're maybe touching the back of the top teeth. If you were to take that and just move it a little bit down forward so that you're doing that kind of attack on the top lip, well, this is not TCE. It's similar to what was taught during the Super Chops era, but it enables you to make a wider variety of tone. Now, basically what I did over the course of about 6 weeks is I practiced this Chet Baker transcription, both with the inappropriate TCE hard tongue attack and this much softer this kind of, you know, much more sort of, well, less compression and less force on the actual I can't think of words anymore. Less, you know, just less a less firm attack. And by practicing both ways, I've reached a point over a number of weeks where they just kind of merged into one. They met in the middle. And so I would say that, yeah, you know, if you want to allow more air through, you can just relax the tongue a bit. Now, a real purist would say, well, that stops being TCE. But it's like, at what point is, a technique supposed to be a style of playing or a style of music? We can't really think like that. If you're going to a gig and someone wants you to do a thing and they're paying you to do it, that's what you got to do. You can't say, oh, but I've found this crazy teacher in New York who told me I should play the trumpet like this. That's so yeah, that's it's definitely been a bit of a battle.
Always
for
a
me.
good idea.
Yeah.
It's always a good point to like not let the technique in the system to get in the way of the playing and the music.
No.
It's like whether we're doing stamp or atoms or TC or whatever, it's like, of course, the overall goal isn't that we're going to excel at the technique.
That's right. Yeah.
And then that will bring the music. It's like we want to use that as a tool to help us execute our musical ideas.
And it's certainly something that, I being out there on the internet as the TCE teacher guy, or not a TCE teacher guy, I do get a lot of people where sometimes I say, you've had lessons off of me for 6 months or so, but actually what you need is just to join a band and play for a few years and try to apply this as best you can. But really it's not, it's your sort of a musical awareness that holds you back as much as your technical ability. Strangely, I've got like I sort of hinted before about how I certainly don't go all in TCE with anyone that doesn't ask for it. But I've got a young pupil who's about 12, and he can play from double pedal C to C above the staff with very little effort, but probably couldn't sight read Twinkle Twinkle Little Star if his life depended on it. And it's like, okay, well, let's spend some years doing music. Yeah.
We have another question here from Arda Harman, and it seems like there may be just a misunderstanding. So maybe this will help clear up. I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'll try and read it in a way. The English is a little broken. When I touch the top of the tongue to the top of the lip. So when top of the tongue touches the top of the lip to the top lip, I can't touch the bottom lip to touch the cutting edge of the top teeth. How can I do these both at the same time? So I think he's thinking that the lower lip is touching the top teeth, but the lower lip is on the bottom teeth.
Okay, so I would say, just as a general tip to anyone who wants to break down what's happening in here, there are hand-drawn images of this sort of thing, and a lot of them are really confusing as well. So it may not even help to look them up, but I've got one on the tonguecontrolled.info site, which I think is the simplest way to understand things. I would, just to directly answer what you've said there, start off with this idea that comes from Jerry Callett's DVD, which is to actually fold the tongue between the teeth in this way. Don't overdo it. It's really easy to break the lips apart, and if the lips aren't touching, we've got problems. And then just just experiment with trying to keep that tongue in place and make sound at the same time. So you can see how I sort of close things around it. And just don't expect it to be perfect straight away. But that's what I would say is just, if you try too hard to do anything in particular or to feel something out, then you may end up just becoming obsessed with something that doesn't matter. But if the tongue is between the teeth, whether it's folded or if it's just like this, then the air has to go over the top of the tongue. There's nowhere else for it to go. So you could even go a step further and just say, at this point, my tongue is right outside my mouth, but it's doing all the things I described. It's touching the cutting edge of the top teeth. It's touching the inside of the top lip. And the only difference between that and playing is that I bring the tongue back inside the mouth so that the lips can touch each other. And then we can use it to make sound. Hopefully that's helpful.
Very.
I mean, I should say I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and you know, I make little YouTube videos about this at times. So if people want to get in touch with me through either through Trumpet Planet or tonguecontrol.info websites, then or Facebook, I should say. I mean, we're on Facebook right now. I didn't even sort of occur to me, but drop me a message, join our group, and I'm not going to charge people for answering questions and just trying to clear up confusion, because I just want this information to be out there. But
Yeah. So this this has been very, very interesting and great. We're running. Let's see. We're running here an hour and 20 minutes nearly. So obviously, your wealth of knowledge here on all this and enthusiasm is seemingly, I think you could probably continue and keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
But we're gonna have to kind of wrap up here soon. Is there? Let's see if there's some more questions. So Arda commented back, "I'm outside, but that seems logical. Thank you very much for that."
Brilliant.
Yeah, and that explanation that you had just about sticking your tongue out and then using that kind of as a guide, that actually to me made a lot of sense. It was very clear way to do it. So you mentioned the site. So what are some resources? What are some ways that people can stay in touch with you? They can find you. They can get these questions answered or lessons or learn more about this.
Okay, so I wouldn't want to turn it into a sales pitch, because I'm as a business person, I'm my own worst enemy. But I would say if you start off with
but people are interested and they want to and we want to make sure that you shared your time and knowledge with us today, and people are going to want to find you and reach out to you. So where is the best way for that to happen?
Okay, so I would just say start off with the Jerome Callett Facebook group. If you want to join, please answer questions. There are only 2 questions. Why do you want to join, and have you heard of Jerome Callett? If you say yes and yes, you don't get in. I want to know that you can have a conversation. Other than that, anyone is welcome. And then I'll say it a little slower, tongue controlled, that's one word, .info is a website all about just explaining one way of understanding TCE. I have got a blog at Trumpet Planet. That's the web address is funny because I thought I was being clever, but it's trumpetpla.net, which says planet and there's a dot in the middle, but yeah, not as clever as you'd think. So actually my email address is rich@trumpetpla.net. And I've got another website, and this is the last one, which is Neoteric Brass, NEOTERIC brass.com. And that's actually just my little store where I sell the ebooks. I would be happy to put up a discount code. So should we say it will take me a few minutes after the end of this for me to do it. But if we say, when you check out, use PTW 2020, do it in all capital letters, like maybe we can comment it underneath or something after, easy 20% discount or something like that. But I think the thing that's worth knowing is if you buy an ebook, then you get a half price lesson with it. So that's a good thing. And the thing is, if you contact me for lessons, you're going to need the book anyway. So either way, you won't pay full price for them both.
Oh, that's very very generous. That's great. So maybe after this, once you've got that set up, maybe pop into the group on the live stream and then just comment. You can comment all those links on the bottom, and then those will all be there. So everyone who's watching now, if you want to find these links and you want that discount code so you can continue learning more about this method, then that's going to be your way to go.
Yeah.
Are you on Instagram or Twitter or any of those?
Yeah. So both Instagram and Twitter, I am at Trumpet Planet. Is there another one? No, there isn't another thing, is there? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, but I haven't logged in for over 2 years.
Yeah, LinkedIn is one of those ones that I log into once a year on my birthday
Yeah.
in order to answer people's birthday messages.
Yeah.
So I think this has been a very interesting and very enlightening to myself, and I'm sure a lot of our members who maybe have heard about some of these ideas and concepts,
Yeah.
but they really didn't have understanding of the nuance and the depth of how they can be implemented within your playing.
Yeah.
And I think that this has definitely given me a lot to think about. And I'm gonna have my horn out in just a couple of minutes for a practice session, and I'm gonna try and
see what you can find.
understand this a little bit. Exactly.
Yeah.
So a little we're gonna see here if there's any more questions popping in, but otherwise a little housekeeping on our end real quick. Of course, every week we have live streams here in the PTW group, and next week we will have 2 fantastic live streams. And sign up on the email list at positivetrumpetersworldwide.com, and you will get the link to these Zoom sessions, which are simulcast live on Facebook with approximately 30-second delay. And you can get in on the action. And of course, we have t-shirts, and I think we still have some stickers left. These are a hot commodity, the PTW stickers. It's a relative hot commodity. So if you want to keep in touch, that's the best way to do it. I'm looking to see if there's more questions. But other than that, did you have any final little nuggets of wisdom that you could pass us off with?
Nuggets of wisdom.
I mean, you've covered so much at this point. It's
yeah.
it's
I mean,
incredible.
the thing is, I would just say, open mind. This is I've spent years obsessing over information that was hard to dig up, and there have been other people, Jerome Callatt, Bob Civiletti, Ralph Salamone, Lee Adams, who have all worked really hard to discover everything that we can about playing using alternative ideas. And just don't be scared. Trumpets playing is supposed to be fun, so maybe this will help to make it more fun for you as well.
Absolutely, that is perfect sentiment.
I'm always saying things like this. I think that we're probably less receptive to this stuff the more that we've learned about it. Certainly if you've found that Christian Steenstrup's breathing techniques have been the best thing for your trumpet playing, then hearing someone like me telling you that you can play notes by spitting isn't going to go down too well. But maybe one day you'll want it. And just bear in mind that there are people like me out there.
Absolutely, yeah. Having an open mind is essential in music. Absolutely. Well, I will say from all of us at PTW, we are very, very thankful and grateful for you sharing your time and your knowledge with us and with our community. I'm positive that this is going to get a lot of wheels going for a lot of people, and I think it's going to benefit a lot of the members in the group. So we thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, this evening.
Super. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
And anybody, if you have questions, he's going to post his links down below, and that is a way that you can
it's on the mug.
It's on the mug. That's it. Trumpet Planet. Incredible. So, all right. Well, everybody have a good rest of your day. And Rich, thank you again. And we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Bye for now.